Starting off strong with the dancing plague in number 10. The dancing plague sounds like the Harlem Shake, like it does, but it was real. It sounds like a bunch of people who just couldn't stop listening to ABBA. Oh wait, that's just me, because their new songs came out and I'm just obsessed. The dancing plague was actually a real thing that occurred in Strasbourg in July 1518. The whole phenomenon kicked off when a woman named Frau Troffea stepped into the street and began essentially doing like the twist and shout, and she did this for about a week. And then soon over 40 people joined her, all doing like the same move. A month later, 400 people were involved. For a while, local physicians blamed the hot blood and encouraged it as a way to quell the boogie nights. They even brought in professional dancers and a band. But then people started like collapsing and dying of strokes and heart attacks. So like what? Like what even is this? Like this is real. Like you're probably thinking like, Rachel, come on, we aren't that gullible. Well, Google it, baby. It is a well-documented event. The movers and shakers were eventually whisked away to a mountaintop to pray for absolution, and that cured them. I don't know why. One theory suggests that this was a result of consuming ergot, a fungus commonly found on damp rye which produces hallucinations and spasms, but there's no clear answer. People just love to dance. No idea. It's so weird, right? Like I was like, this has gotta be fake, and they were like, no, it's well documented. I'm like, okay. Sure enough, whatever, Google. I'm beginning to trust you less and less these days. Anyways, number 9. Disembarkment syndrome. Disembarkment syndrome is a very difficult condition to diagnose and even more challenging to cure. It is a strange neurological condition that follows a motion event like flying on a plane or being on a cruise ship. The patient will feel as though they are still swaying or rocking as if they're still on the craft. Symptoms vary in severity day by day, but they can also include confusion, nausea, sensitivity to light, headaches, a bobbing sensation, and could relate to stress and fatigue. Currently, there are no tests that can accurately confirm the diagnosis. Doctors usually default to it when they've ruled out all the other options, but no one knows what causes it. Dr. Yoon-hee Cha in America is the only clinical investigator of the disease, and her findings so far hint that the issue may be linked to, and I quote, hypermetabolism in a deep area of the brain called the entorhinal cortex. I probably said that wrong, sorry guys. Unquote. But that's about all we got right now, so hopefully those people can feel better very soon, but it all depends, right? Number 8. The madness of King George. Does anyone else have Jonathan Groff as King George, like in The Third and Hamilton in their head? No? Just me. Okay, cool. The madness of King George is a mystery a lot of historians are determined to solve. His infamous erratic behavior has become the talking point in movies, plays, and even children's books. But what happened? Was this simply a case of an undiagnosed mental illness? Well, probably. Other theories say that he had a case of porphyria, which includes aches and blue urine. Other evidence is found in his letters. At times his writing appears succinct and direct, while others he appears to repeat himself and use more flowery language, a trait very commonly found in individuals who live with mania and depression. But as for the case of porphyria, in his medical records, it is shown doctors gave him gentian, a plant with blue flowers that could also be responsible for the blue color of his urine. Porphyria, though, is also hereditary and none of his descendants had it, so it is likely it was a mental health issue, but as to what was the official diagnosis, we can never really be sure. Number 7. Microcephaly. Microcephaly is a birth defect that affects every 1 in 800 to 5,000 babies born. There is no way to predict the condition unless diagnosed in the 3rd trimester via ultrasound, but even by then it's already too late. Even with that, the cause and treatment of the condition still remains unknown. Microcephaly is a condition in which a child's head doesn't form properly, being a few times smaller than it should be. In the womb, a baby's head grows because the brain grows. So if the brain doesn't grow, then neither does the head. Severe cases where the head is even smaller could have resulted from injury in the womb. Accompanying conditions are seizures, developmental delay, movement and balance issues, hearing loss, difficulty swallowing, and vision problems. The list of theories as to how it happens is pretty long, from genetic shifts to accidents, malnutrition, alcohol, and more, but it remains a lifelong condition with no set protocols or practices as to how to treat it, even beyond a cure. So doctors still remain baffled and there's no way of preventing it. Number 6. Tree Man Syndrome. Epidermodysplasia vericiformis. That is the actual scientific name. In a previous video we talked about Stoneman syndrome. Well, this next one turns you into a living human tree. Kind of. It is shocking to look at and almost looks too remarkable to be true, but sadly it is. EV is a rare inherited form of HPV, the human papillomavirus. It causes a chronic infection of bark-like growths on the skin, and they just get insane. They usually develop on the hands and feet, but have been known to develop on the face in severe cases. Currently, there are no effective treatments besides removing the warts, but nothing can stop them from growing. A man in Jerusalem hadn't been able to use his hands for years until a doctor was finally able to successfully surgically remove them, but still, there is no cure for halting the process altogether, but hopefully the cure will follow the same one, that is for HPV, which is hopefully closer than we think it is. Number 5, the boy who never slept. Putting your child down for a nap is probably one of the most relieving parts as a parent. Yes, parenthood is a joy, but it's damn exhausting. I do not know how my mom and dad did it, honestly. But imagine having a 4-year-old who never slept. Ever. That's exactly what happened to Rhett Lamb, a young boy who boggled scientists. The mother was sure something was wrong as soon as he was born, and after realizing she wasn't just an anxious mom, theories started flying. After multiple tireless testing, finally they had an answer to the mystery. So yes, technically it's solved. I know that, but it was still a mystery and it was unsolved for a period of time. Sue me. It's really interesting. Rhett had an extremely rare condition called Chiari malformation, meaning the brain was literally being squeezed into the upper part of the spine. After undergoing surgery to remove the bone around his spinal column, doctors expected the results to set in a year later. There was a 50-50 chance that his sleep was going to improve, and it did! So I know. Okay, but this was like an episode of House. It starts out a mystery and then they solve it. Number 4, Wim Hof, aka the Iceman. Anyone who has experienced a Canadian winter wishes they had this guy's problem. Though it doesn't really sound like a problem at all, but definitely a mystery. Wim Hof isn't bothered by the cold. That's right, the cold never bothered him anyway. Over 30 years ago, Wim Hof from the Netherlands was going for a walk when he had the overwhelming impulse to see if he could swim in icy water and how it was. It made him feel so good that he's done it every day since. He has since been called the Iceman, his ability to withstand the cold superhuman. In January 1999, he traveled to the Arctic Circle to run a half marathon in his bare feet. 3 years later, he earned the Guinness Book of World Record for the longest amount of time under the ice, twice the length of an Olympic pool. Insane. He even climbed Mount Kilimanjaro in shorts. When Dr. Ken Kaemler heard of his case, he immediately began to study him. Kaemler had treated dozens of people who tried and failed to climb Mount Kilimanjaro due to the extreme cold. The only explanation he's uncovered is that it must be something to do with his mindset, or the wiring in his brain. This man defies science in ways that no one quite understands. And if you want to learn more, you can check out his website. Number 3, Parry-Romberg syndrome. Another unbelievably rare and terrifying disorder where the skin and soft tissues of half of the face atrophy. It usually occurs in the left half of the face and is more common in women than in men. The deterioration begins above the upper jaw, between the nose and the upper lip, then to the eye, ear, and neck areas. This process may also affect the gums and roof of the mouth. So essentially, the left side of your face caves in on itself and ages 80 years. Hair on that side turns white and falls out. This entire process takes place over a 2 to 10 year period before it finally stabilizes. Sometimes it hinders vision, other times the effects are just cosmetic, but still a frustrating process for the patients going through it. On top of that, there is no cure and there are no current treatments to stop the deterioration. So far, the only option is surgical intervention with reconstructive procedures. Number 2, RPI deficiency. Introducing the second rarest disease in the world, fitting for number 2, with only 4 known cases ever historically diagnosed. White matter is made up of tissue that includes nerve fibers that connect nerve cells. So, needless to say, one of the most important parts of the brain. RPI deficiency patients have diffuse white matter abnormalities, which causes psychomotor regression, developmental delays, along with seizures, poor vision, and slow emotional and physical reflexes. Scientists are working tirelessly to find a way to cure it, but you might be thinking, if it's so rare, why are we so stressed about it? Well, you might think that with your perfectly healthy brain, but to the next potential patient, a cure could mean the world. Well, actually no, it will mean the world. Though doctors have been able to figure out the cause, the cure still remains unsolved. Number 1. Field's disease. Field's disease was named after a pair of twins in Wales, Catherine and Christy, who were the first to be diagnosed with the disease, and they're the only ones. In total, there have only been 2 diagnosed cases of the disease in history, which makes it like the rarest in the world. What is it exactly? Field's disease is a neuromuscular disease that affects the voluntary movement of muscles. Due to the rarity of the case, information is very limited. Doctors first noticed it when the girls were about 4 years old, and by the time they turned 9 they could barely walk. By age 11 they couldn't eat or write by themselves, and by 14 they lost the ability to speak. So as you can see, the degeneration is quite rapid. Alongside losing their ability to move and function, Catherine and Christy also experienced over 100 painful muscle spasms daily. The doctors did numerous tests to rule out other conditions, but still they have no idea what is causing the disease. Nor, of course, is there a cure. While they work to find one, the best they can do is make sure the girls are comfortable to the best of their ability. Otherwise, Field's disease remains a mystery, but hopefully not for much longer. Number 10. Made of stone. This one disturbs me so much and it's terrifying that it hasn't been solved yet. If you're a Game of Thrones fan, which hopefully you are, you've heard of grayscale, the disease that like poor Shireen Baratheon suffered in the series. Yeah, you know what I mean? Well, it may have been inspired by something that actually exists. Though there is a 1 in 2 million chance of getting it, it does happen. What is it exactly? Stoneman syndrome is a condition where the ligaments, tendons, muscles all slowly turn into bone. It starts with a stiffness in the neck and shoulders and then gradually moves down the body. Imagine having 2 different skeletons in your body. That's kind of what it is. What's even more heartbreaking about this mysterious disease is that you can't remove it. In fact, any attempt to remove the bone makes it grow faster and come back stronger. I hope they come up with a cure as soon as possible, as currently there isn't one, as to why it's a medical mystery. But because it's so rare, it makes it even that much harder to cure it because they don't have that much on file. Anyways, let's keep going. Number 9. Sirenomelia. I pretended I was a mermaid countless times as a kid, and still do every time I do a dolphin kick in the water because I'm like, I'm a mermaid. But I kinda don't want to be, and I'm kinda glad I'm not because of this. Sirenomelia is the condition in which a child is born with their legs fused together in a way that makes them look like a mermaid. Sadly, it doesn't have a happy ending, as most children born with this defect don't live very long. The 2 most famous cases are that of Tiffany Yorks, who was the oldest living survivor, living to the age of 27, and Shiloh Pepin. Patients of this condition barely survive the womb or the first few years of life due to organ issues that follow the disease. The exact cause of Sirenomelia remains unknown to this day, as it appears to be a random occurrence and there's no way of predicting it. Number 8. Morgellons disease. This next one is a more controversial disease. Morgellons disease is an unexplained condition where a patient believes that there is something crawling beneath their skin. As a result, scabs and irritation erupt from persistent scratching, along with small fibers. It is controversial because the research done on the condition has yielded conflicting results. Some doctors think it is a result of a delusional infestation, while others believe it is an infectious process in the skin cells. The Center for Disease Control yielded a study that concluded it isn't caused by an infection. However, multiple studies have reported a possible link between Morgellons and another bacterial infection. To this day though, there is still no proven treatment or confirmed understanding of the disease, so for now it remains a medical mystery. Number 7. Putrid finger syndrome. This one sounds gross. And it is. You're welcome. Imagine being so smelly that you could fill a banquet hall with your stench, even if you shower all the time. Poor guy. Well, that's what happened to this 29-year-old patient 5 years after he pricked his finger on a chicken bone. His finger accumulated an infection that made his body smell like really bad, specifically that arm. When he had to be examined, it was entirely intolerable for doctors to even be near him for long periods of time. Even worse, the infection couldn't be identified. No one knew what the bacteria was or how to get rid of it. They tried several treatments including ultraviolet light, but nothing worked. But thankfully for the man, the infection spontaneously cleared up, and doctors have no idea how. That's pretty lucky, but if it did come from a chicken bone, then maybe we should all put Kevlar gloves on next time we chow down on some Popeyes just to be safe, because I don't want that. I do not want that. Number 6. Baby brain teeth. Strange things happen while we're in the womb. It's a crazy, magical waterbed of weird stuff. Sometimes wires get crossed and accidents happen. you know, because that's life. Doctors suspected something was up when the head of a 4-month-old baby started to grow unusually fast. They weren't so surprised to see a tumor, as that was their suspicion, but what they found inside the tumor was kind of ugh. When they scanned the brain, they saw what looked to be fully formed adult teeth inside the tumor itself. Sure enough, that's what they found. Doctors removed several fully formed teeth usually found in the lower jaw. While this isn't entirely unheard of, teeth appearing in tumors it had never happened in this kind of tumor, so as to how or why these teeth were found in this type of tumor remains a mystery, but it was probably something to do with whatever smorgasbord was going on inside the tummy. It's a weird time. Number 5. Stiff person syndrome. No, this isn't referring to someone's personality, maybe, but to a condition that affects 1 to 3 people per million. Super rare. As no one is quite sure as to the possible cause, it is diagnosed through exclusion, so similar to the Disembarkment syndrome I mentioned, so they have to test a whole bunch of other things to see if this is the case. Some of the main symptoms are, of course, stiffness in the lower back and legs, followed by severe and painful spasms from sudden movement. So say for instance if they got scared, it would be like pain all through their body. Though the symptoms themselves can be treated, there is yet no way to eliminate SPS from the body. The condition can show up at any point in life with no known trigger. There are only a handful of clinics around the world that know how to help treat this condition, but due to lack of cases and study, there is still a long way to go towards a cure. Number 4. Phineas Gage. I'm sure if any one of us had a pole jabbed through our head, we wouldn't be the same after that either. But for Phineas Gage, the change was night and day. Phineas was a foreman working on the railway bed for Burlington Railroad when a sudden accidental explosion on September 13, 1848 sent a 3-foot 7-inch iron tamping bar through his head. He survived miraculously, but his personality changed drastically. Prior to the accident, he was reliable, shrewd, and capable, while after he became stubborn, rude, and loved to swear. Me too, man, but still. Entirely opposite to who he was. I mean, obviously the man lost half his brain, but his personality switch remained a mystery. Little was understood about the function of the brain, and though the accident obviously played a large role, no one quite knew how Gage could have ended up so different. Number 3. The tight seal. Sometimes when I'm on Central Dark, I wish my eyes would just seal themselves shut, because then I wouldn't be able to see anything. But when I read this story, I better be careful what I wish for. Psychological or one-of-a-kind case? Doctors are still trying to decide. After recovering from a sinus and staph infection in 2008, Natalie Adler started feeling the strangest phenomenon. For 3 days, her eyes would seal themselves shut, only to release themselves on the 3rd day with her vision entirely restored. The seal would be accompanied by neck pain and body aches. Now over 30, Natalie has to get Botox injections to keep her eyes partially open and has been declared legally blind. She still suffers blindness at least once a month, but still has no confirmed diagnosis or treatment for her condition. However, Natalie remains hopeful and plans on writing a book about her journey. Number 2. The giggle bug. We've all, hopefully, laughed so hard that we can barely speak. But for Shu Pinghui, she was never able to stop. Ever since she had a fever when she was just 8 months old, the now 12-year-old girl can't stop laughing. Her parents are desperate for a cure, especially after the condition worsened after she was 2 years old. She lost her ability to learn how to speak, and now can only communicate through giggles. Her father has spent all of his wages as a construction worker, but still nothing has worked. What should be a sound that brings joy to her loved ones makes them all the more sad. The only hope currently on the table our test specialists are conducting that include her frontal lobe. They suspect that the fever caused damage to the frontal lobe, but nothing has yet to be confirmed, so it still remains a really sad, happy mystery. Number 1, last but not least, Gloria Ramirez. I actually think this is an episode on Grey's Anatomy, but I can't remember, so just let us know in the comments if you know what I'm talking about, right? The case of Gloria Ramirez still boggles doctors to this day. Also known as the Toxic Lady, Ramirez was sent to the emergency room in 1994 due to cervical cancer complications. Things were operating as usual until medical staff began to faint after experiencing severe shortness of breath and muscle spasms. There were also reports of an ammonia-like smell coming from her blood. Sadly, Ramirez died after kidney failure, but meanwhile 23 people fell incredibly ill, along with 5 who became hospitalized themselves. every single one of them had come in contact with Ramirez. What's even more terrifying is that there was no explanation for the issues. Doctors defaulted onto mass hysteria, but there was no explanation beyond that. Officials conducted 3 autopsies on the body, which led to the conclusion that a product called DMSO cream might have caused it, but as for the other aspects, no one is quite sure.
Number 10. Theater. Look, I really like this one. It's a medical procedure and theater at the same time. Taking a look at Mesoamerican culture, and more specifically the Aztecs, well, they loved to sacrifice people in front of roaring crowds nonetheless, and basically it was a very crude operations. Doctors today have to go through a lot, and I am thankful for them. Really, I am. But I'm sure even the worst second-rate doctor today knows that taking someone's heart out, Mortal Kombat style, is a little bit of a Hippocratic no-no. No anesthetic, no hand washing, and this time the crowd really doesn't want you to wake up. Man, that's rough. They would just cut you open, grab it out, Kali Ma style. Not good. Nah, don't want it. Nope, no thanks. Number 9, hemispherectomy. Hold on to your bark bucket, folks, cause, well, I don't do well with this sort of thing. This surgery entails removing or disabling half of the human brain. Usually done for those suffering with seizures, which really suck. The success rate is around the 2/3 margin, and I'm about a 50 on the VOM scale. Ooh, don't like it, makes me queasy. 20% of the people see at least a large reduction in those seizures. Those that don't, if properly considered, can go for a repeat surgery. But the last time I checked, 2 halves, put them together, that makes a whole, which is a whole brain. So I don't exactly know how that works, but okay, I guess the doctors know better. While there are some physical side effects, like that half of your body not working as well as it did before, or maybe that was the reason why you went in the first place, however, the brain does seem to make new neural connections, thus making up for a lot of the mental capacity the other half of your brain did before it was removed. That's cool stuff, man. Damn. Number 8. Here's another one I can't pronounce. Hemicorporectomy. 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 Number 8. Hemicorporectomy. Also known as a translumbar amputation, or in nerd talk, remember that one time in that one Star Wars movie where Obi-Wan Kenobi cut Darth Maul in half after he was enraged by Qui-Gon's passing? Okay, that, but for real, and not charming actor Ewan McGregor performing your surgery. Although he's a handsome guy, he could probably do anything he wants. Can't wait to see Obi-Wan, I'm really excited. However, it is a severely drastic procedure, recommended only as a last resort for patients with severe or potentially fatal illnesses such as osteomyelitis, tumors, and severe traumas. It also means you lose access to both your gabagool and your main exit, if you catch my drift. I honestly don't know how doctors do it. It's just, oh man, that's a rough one, man. That's tough.
Number 7, Landon Jones. It is rare for anyone to be able to resist the French fry. Everyone has that friend that says, no, I don't want McDonald's, like I don't want any. And then you order some and they always are just like, are your French fries? And you're like, get out of here, those are mine. Anyways, that would be me. Well, Landon Jones may be the only person who would be able to resist. On October 14th, 2013, the preteen Landon Jones woke up with a bacterial infection in his left lung, which was treated successfully, or so they thought. Landon lost his appetite entirely. This boy is literally never hungry. His parents have to bargain with him to eat, but unfortunately he keeps losing weight. After visiting specialist after specialist, the only thing doctors have been able to determine is that Landon may be the only one of his kind, which doesn't make it very helpful. There are no other cases like this in the world. Landon did start having absent seizures 3 years prior, which could provide some hint as to what is going on. The leading explanation is that it is a rare condition that affects the hypothalamus, the tiny area of the brain that controls hunger, thirst, blood pressure, and sleep. I wasn't able to find any recent articles referring to his progress now, but I hope, Landon, that wherever you are, that you are doing much better. Number 6, a water allergy. A human being can only survive without water for around 3 days, so this medical condition is definitely surprising. How can we be allergic to something we need to survive? The condition, while still a mystery, has a name: aquagenic urticaria, and affects less than 100 people across the world. Whenever someone with this condition comes in contact with water, they break out in hives and rashes that last around an hour, and researchers have no idea what the underlying cause is. The leading theory is that it is caused by allergens in the water, so patients are encouraged to drink purified water or bathe in purified water as well. But beyond that, they have no clue. Due to the rarity of the condition, there is very little data to study, but I think we can all be grateful it isn't common either. Number 5. Mandy Sellers. When Mandy was born, she appeared to be a healthy child until she started growing. Despite having a very lean frame, Mandy's legs alone weigh 200 pounds, 5 times the normal size. She was a medical mystery doctors had no idea how to solve. The only way they could foresee stopping the growth of her legs was amputation. This procedure eventually happened in 2010 when she developed an infection. Even stranger though, this didn't stop the condition at all as the leg started growing back. Imagine how frustrating that would be. Fortunately though, according to Mandy's website, she was able to go on an experimental new drug that helped to shrink her legs. Then finally, after years of suffering, she was able to be officially diagnosed. Mandy's condition is the result of a mutation of the PIK3CA gene, the only one of its kind, something she's pretty proud of. Still, doctors have yet to come up with a more effective treatment. As of 2019, she is still waiting for a new drug trial, and her legs appear to be kind of plateauing, so who knows where she's at now, but Mandy, I hope you're doing better. Number 4. Spontaneous accent. What do you mean? Nobody does that on this channel. Anyways, shut up, Rachel. God. Imagine waking up one morning and finally having the accent you've always wanted. I'm sure there is someone out there who wishes for that. But Rosemary Dorr wasn't one of them. Southern Ontario-based Rosemary Dorr immediately rushed to the hospital in 2006 after sensing signs of a stroke. She ended up spending most of that summer in post-stroke care, but what was very strange was her recovery. Rosemary took on an entirely new accent. Her Southern Ontario dialect became that of Newfoundland, and if you live in Canada, you know how different those accents are. She couldn't shake it. Rosemary was suffering from a real condition called foreign accent syndrome. It's a thing! Only 60 other cases have ever been confirmed worldwide. The first known was a Norwegian woman during World War II who started speaking with a German accent after a head injury. Very, very poor timing. The exact cause is still unknown, but you know, hopefully Rosemary's learned to live with that. It's a pretty fun accent. Number 3. The girl who cries stone. From a magic spell to a witch's curse, this little girl from Yemen shocked doctors and mystics with her strange ability. Sadia started literally crying stone since she was 8 years old, and no one can sort out why. Her father was desperate to find a treatment, and despite many x-rays in local clinics, nothing out of the ordinary was spotted. Most of the stones came out in the afternoon, weirdly enough, and she can produce as many as 100 in a single day. Thankfully, they do not hurt her, and for the most part, her life is normal. Since her case, one other woman in Bajal experienced similar symptoms, except this time they were accompanied by bouts of unconsciousness and a swollen abdomen. She has since been treated and recovered fully, but as to what is wrong with Sadia, no one is quite sure. Number 2. Brooke Greenberg. Sadly, Brooke passed away at the young age of 20 before she ever found the explanation for her condition. However, there is a chance that she might never have been aware of it. Brooke's body refused to age, and at the time of her death, she had never learned to speak and had the mental capacity of a toddler and remained the size of a baby. As an actual baby, her survival was considered a miracle in itself, as she endured a stroke and several stomach ulcers. She also mysteriously had a brain tumor that put her into a deep sleep for 2 weeks. Then it disappeared and she woke up. Kinda weird, right? By age 16, she hadn't lost her baby teeth, though her bones had appeared to have aged, just not grown. Her case was enough to bring retired medical expert Richard F. Walker back to the field. In fact, he has made it his life's work to uncover what caused her condition. Her case has since been labeled Syndrome X, and he continues to study similar patients. He believes that if they solve it, they will not only help these people, but perhaps discover the key to the fountain of youth. And last but not least, a superhuman memory. If I were to have a superpower, I would either want teleportation or superhuman intelligence. I think about that every single day. So the mysterious condition that Jill Price has me like green with envy. God, oh, what I would do, the books I would read. Jill can name every single detail of every day she's ever lived. Give her a date and she could tell you everything she did with ease, from like how many stirs she stirred her coffee with to like what she read that morning, every single thing. Her condition is called HSAM, highly autobiographical memory, and why people like her seem to have this superhuman ability is a complete mystery. Brain images have depicted differences in the structure of their brains to muggles like us, but it can't be confirmed as to whether it is these brain differences that cause the condition. Oh man, but if they could patent that into like a super juice or a kind of coffee, I'd be so happy. I'd be just very, very excited about that, because good God, dreams to life, you know what I mean?
Number 10, plastic surgery. Some celebrities you think are immortal when really it's just their plastic surgery that's fooling you. Unless you're Paul Rudd, he's definitely immortal. Sometimes it's obvious who's had it done, and sometimes it's really obvious who's gotten it done. Coming from the Greek term plastikos, which means to mold or to form, the oldest known plastic surgery took place in ancient Egyptian days. There's a medical text from the ancient Egyptian days that was named after the American Egyptologist who got it in 1862, and in it contains these ancient procedures. They look a little bit different from the shows we see today. You know, where it's like all these medical, we're gonna take this thing and put it into this guy's head. And you're like, how did they do that? This was a lot different. This is ancient procedures we're talking about. What procedure back then was to fix nasal injuries. This method used wooden splints, lint, swabs, and the first ever nose job was done. Even in 2000, a mummy was found with a prosthetic toe. So they asked volunteers to try walking with it to determine if it was created for purpose or for style. That's nice. Here, try on this mummy's toe. Take a lap, see how you feel. Are you cursed? Plastic surgery in the sense of reconstruction, that first account comes from India in the 6th century. The Indian physician Sashruta Shamita is considered the father of plastic surgery. His patients were more interested in the cosmetic side effects, whereas the Egyptian practices were to fix the nose. Now around 500 BC, reconstructive surgery was done in India as well to reform noses that were cut off as a punishment. Number 9, broken bones. Sometimes a bone breaks and it needs immediate medical attention. Maybe a bone is pushing into a vital organ, maybe it's healing the wrong way, or maybe it's just a toe and you can't do anything about it but hobble around the house all day and learn new curse words as you mumble them and hobble. We all had that one friend in school who always had a cast on, or that blue finger restraint. There's always the one kid. But what happens if you broke your arm in the 1300s? Then what? Well, you wouldn't get any cool signatures from your cool friends, but what would happen is that they would use these blocks of wood and cloth and just wrap everything around completely tight. Just the biggest cast possible. You actually could sign your name on this thing as many times as you wanted. I take that back. This thing was, you pretty much had a coffin around your leg, more or less. Number 8, trepanation. One of history's oldest surgeries, trepanation was the worst, that's for sure. To this day, we're not even sure why this was a thing, but we picked up a few ideas along the way. Turning the clocks back thousands of years, trepanation was the practice of drilling holes into your skull. A popular theory here is that trepanation was done to release evil spirits. Yeah, let's just drill holes into our skull and see if our mental illness just goes away. As barbaric as this sounds, skulls found in Peru hint that this procedure wasn't as fatal as you would think. The reason that this would happen was also to clear out bone fragments after skull fractures. So you'd show up with a headache and then you'd leave with a hole in your head. But honestly, the fact that you're leaving at all is pretty surprising. They obviously didn't have advanced medical instruments. They would use any sharp instruments they could find, like rocks, flint. It was pretty rough. This was the first surgical procedure around 6500 BC. The term trepanation comes from the Greek term trepanon, which means a borer, to drill, essentially.
Number 7, lobotomy. Hello there, lobotomite. What brings you to the big empty? Follow New Vegas reference, anyone? Gotta have a little fun in this list. We're talking about some weird stuff, gotta have some fun. Well, yes, lobotomies. Maybe you've heard of them, maybe not, most likely. But basically, it's a surgical procedure that severs most connections of the prefrontal cortex. If that sounds like a really bad idea, that's because it is. It was meant to help mentally ill patients, the truly disturbed, or sometimes even people who didn't really need one and rather just needed better medical attention, but we just didn't know any better back then. There was some success with this awful surgery, but more often than not, it led to worse side effects. And well, if you've ever seen Shutter Island, then you know what I'm talking about. Is it better to live as a monster or die as a good man? Number 6, the Lindberg operation. Okay, imagine going in for a surgery that's going to make you live better. But you have to wait a while, and you worry about that day for months. You think about loved ones, what your life has been, and what it will be afterwards. Finally, the day approaches, and now your bum is hanging out a hospital gown. The doctors try to relax you as the surgery is about to commence. That's when they roll in this machine with arms, and they tell you that the surgery is going to be completed by a robot controlled by some doctors in New York. You're miles away from that. Well, that sounds scary, but it's true. This actually happened. in what may be the first transatlantic surgery. It's actually pretty cool and could possibly lead to some more life-saving surgeries in the future. That's a pretty cool thing. They had a robot that cut a lady open, took her gallbladder out. It's a crazy thing. Look that one up. It's actually really cool. Number 5. Trepanation. Neil Armstrong, Henry Ford, and the first time I ate McDonald's. All of these events and people are responsible for great first moments in history. First man on the moon, first assembly line, and the first time I knew I was in love. Love me some of that clown beef. Delicious. Anyway, what I'm talking about is what is thought to be the first medical surgical procedure, trepanation, which dates back all the way back to our caveman days, ooga booga. Basically, when there was something wrong with you, the solution was to drill into your scalp until you saw gray matter, and that should release all your pain and pressure and suffering and whatever ails you, sir. Okay. Skulls have been found dating back to 6500 BC, as well as paintings that seem to describe the process. Boy, I need that like a hole in the head. That's a hole in the head? Good.
Nice one!
Not bad. Anyway, number 4. Palm lines. Okay, getting into the really weird stuff here. Everyone at home, I want you to look at your palms. See those lines? Yeah, those lines in your hand. Yeah, they have a reason to be there. Or, so the astrologer who charges $75 an hour from me down the street told me so. Money line, love line. Look, I'm not gonna pretend I know how it works. I'm just a guy trying to be Canada's next biggest comedy star. Hi. However, some folks really go for the whole astrology and healing crystal business. As a result, there's a cosmetic surgery to have the lines on your hand redrawn, if that makes any sense. Wow, okay. I guess to change your fate? Listen, I'm no Confucius, but your fate is decided by you, not an intrusive cosmetic surgery that's gonna make your money line smaller. Right? Number 3, highly an ear job. Hey, look, no judgment here. I am a person just like everyone else. I got likes, dislikes, loves, hates. I am a big fan of the Legend of Zelda series. You weren't expecting that one, baby! Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, Breath of the Wild. How's that for Breath of the Wild, Icarus? Who's at the center of these games? Link and Zelda, 2 elfish-like humans who possess the power of the Triforce. Or highly and technically nerds, I know, I'm sorry. Well, apparently the elf ear look is so desirable that the urge to hiya across your favorite patch of open grass is so strong that some folks are willing to have their ears cropped in order to look like Link permanently. I'm just using Link as an example because there's tons of creatures from other lore that have the same sort of features in the pointy ears, but regardless, removing and reshaping cartilage to achieve that elvish style is a strange one. Number 2, tongue splitting. Alright, you know what this one is, but it's just crazy to me. Tongue bifurcation is done by splitting the tongue. However, I just learned that it's not permanent, so just in case you grow out of your rebellious youth in your late 20s, then not all is lost, my friends. Kinda nice. Some want a certain look. Others do it because, well, it's for the super fun naughty bedroom time. Usually done with a hot scalpel to prevent bleeding, and then the cut sides are sewn and stitched. I don't think there's enough money on earth to have that done to me. I can't. I get a little, you know, it's just not good for, oh. Number 1, conjoined twin separation. This one always fascinated me, still does. It's such an unusual experience and actually pretty rare, but it happens nonetheless. Conjoined twins develop when an early embryo only partially separates to form 2 individuals. Although 2 fetuses will develop from this embryo, they will remain physically connected, most often at the chest, abdomen, or the pelvis. It makes everyday life challenging, and those who don't live like this very curious on how everyday things work. However, in a modern time, there's been great efforts to separate these twins. Every situation is different, and some simply just don't qualify because there are too many vital organs that are shared. However, I think it's amazing. It's a feat of medical science and technology to give people the life that they deserve. To any doctor that's ever pulled this off, thank you. You're amazing. 70% of them are female. I learned that too right before I came in. 70% of conjoined twins are female, and the rest are male, which is a weird stat. That's kind of interesting. I don't know.
Kicking off our list at number 10, dental surgery. Back in the ancient Egyptian world, it's not like you could just take a quick trip to the dentist to get your teeth checked out and cleaned, yada yada, and then you go home, whatever, right? The diet of the average Egyptian was most definitely not exactly, conductive to having an impeccable set of pearly whites. That's mostly due to the fact that the tools used to grind food would often leave traces of sand and or stone behind, which would naturally destroy your chiclets. And through documents found, there have been a few different dental treatments from that time that have been discovered. And It's pretty horrifying, like topical treatments and such. But one case was able to give us a glimpse into what is believed to be the treatment of an abscess, an ancient abscess. We love those. Even more interesting is a mummy that was found from the 4th dynasty. This mummy, in his first molar, was a bunch of surgically produced holes that they believe were used to drain an abscess, which clearly gives us some, very tangible evidence that dental surgeries were in fact happening all those years ago. And before we head into the rest of this list, we also have to remember that all this was done, or most of this was done, without anesthetics, right? No one's gonna put you to sleep and then you wake up and you're like, oh, my teeth are gone, what happened? No, you were awake for the whole thing. It sucked. Number 9, Egyptian stitches. Yeah, gotta talk about Egyptians once again. I'm gonna talk about them quite a bit. They're the OGs. Just in general, while surgery did exist during ancient Egyptian times, invasive surgery wasn't quite as common because, well, obviously, like I just said, no painkillers, no antibiotics, the list goes on, right? No fun. One thing that's less invasive but still extremely important was seen quite a bit during these times. Use of stitches. Yeah, I've never needed any in my life, thank God, knock on wood that I don't need any stitches. Ancient Egyptians found different and effective ways to make their own sutures in order to close these large wounds. They did so by using plant fibers, or hair, or tendons, or wool threads, anything, right? In the oldest known surgical text, which is referred to now as the Edwin Smith Papyrus that came from ancient Egypt, there are 48 different cases of stitches being described. 48, imagine being one of those 48, that's kind of epic, not gonna lie. Number 8, blood transfusion. Back around 70 AD, the Romans were pretty wild when it came to the Colosseum and the games that would go on inside. There was, a lot of bloodshed, and crowds would rush the arena after the day was done. Not to get autographs, but to hopefully get a sip of that sweet gladiator blood. Yeah, blood back then was a magical elixir. And then near the early 1500s, blood was seen as this youth juice. Yeah, you drink some young blood as an elderly, and then those knees, your patellas, would apparently start working again. A lot of theories surrounding blood back then. And in the Middle Ages, bloodletting was a go-to when you were sick because they thought your humors were out of balance. It is so hot in this goddamn room. In 1628, blood circulation was discovered by a man named William Harvey. That changed the game, right? Now, the idea of something going into your bloodstream was in the picture hypothetically. That's a little odd. So we started to test this out on canines. Scientists were injecting them with different substances, and slowly but surely, that turned into blood transfusion between animals, between canines. So this is back in the 1660s, right? That's how early we started injecting things with blood. It's kind of gross. Number 7, tooth extraction. You may not think of surgery when you talk about tooth extractions or whatever, but this for sure counts as surgery. Every time something gets removed from your body and there's blood, I'm gonna count that. Sorry. I had to get a tooth pulled a few years ago and I'm still haunted by it. It is so barbaric the way they do it. They don't slice a line and then gently slide the tooth out. No, they had 2 dentists just grab my tooth at the same time, put their foot up, and then just yank my tooth out. We're still there? Really? Back in the day, pulling teeth was done not to make room for braces, but to solve any problem at all regarding your teeth. Cavity? Gone. Toothache? See you later, tooth. Back in 5000 BC, a Sumerian paper referred to dental worms, so the earliest account of tooth decay, we think. Unless they were actual dental worms, in which case, gross, but no, you had a cavity. We're lucky to have x-rays and modern technology tell us now if the tooth is coming in sideways, but back then, some believed it was always tooth worms, no matter what. If it hurts, it's worms, get them out. Imagine pulling your tooth out and being like, didn't find any worms. Aristotle and Hippocrates wrote about dentistry in 500 BC, and the way that they would handle tooth decay or extraction was by using metal wires to fix wobbly teeth or even a broken jaw. So it was pretty horrible. If you go to the dentist now, just when you sit back and relax, you're sitting back and you're relaxing. That's it. The rest sucks, but these guys would stand up and just get yanked. Number 6, blood transfusion. Back around 70 AD, the Romans were pretty wild when it came to the Colosseum and the games that would go down. There was lots of bloodshed, of course. There's animals and warriors and a lot of stabbies, and crowds would rush the arena after the day was done, not to get autographs, but to hopefully get a sweet sip of that gladiator blood. Yeah, blood was considered a magical elixir back then, and then near the early 1500s, blood was then seen as youth juice. Yeah, if you drink some young blood as an elderly, those knees would just magically come back. Apparently. Don't drink blood if you're watching this. Don't. Unless you're Edward Cullen, don't drink blood. Team Jacob. Lots of theories surrounding blood in the Middle Ages. Bloodletting was a go-to when you were sick because they thought that your humors were out of balance. It was like, oh, you're sick, you just got some weird blood, we'll drain you out a bit. Vampires, all vampires. In 1628, blood circulation was discovered by a man named William Harvey, and that just absolutely changed the game. Now the idea of something going into your bloodstream was in the picture. hypothetically. So we started to test this out on canines, of course. Scientists were injecting them with different substances, and slowly but surely that turned into blood transfusion between canines. So this is back in the 1660s. That's how early we started injecting things. Number 5, mummification. Mummification was common. Even today we're finding more mummies. We're uncovering more ancient history. But how the hell was mummification done back then? How was it done so well? We're talking about teeth worms and trepanation. How did ancient Egyptians figure this out? And how is it done in a way where the bodies are still reserved this long? Well, it wasn't cheap, I'll tell you that for free. Being mummified was reserved for the rich. It's pretty brutal, but what you would do is basically you get a hook in your nose and all your brains would be pulled out. And then they would cut the left side of your stomach, remove all those goods, all the organs, just gone, let those dry, yuck. And then you put the heart back in the body and then you wash the insides out with wine and spices over and over again until eventually you cover the body in salt for 70 days, and around day 40 you gotta stuff it with sand. Come day 70, that's when you can wrap them in those mummy bandages. Then the sarcophagus awaits you, and so does the rest of your life. The jars of organs were also stored in the burial chamber with the sarcophagus. So it was just a big room of yuck. Number 4, cataract surgery. My brother was born with a cataract. This one's for you, homie. Cataract surgery is one of the oldest surgeries in the book. Well, rather, in the painting. Found in a tomb in ancient Egypt was a painting of what is surely the oldest recorded eye surgery. Scientists are able to make this conclusion due to the length of the tool that the doctor is holding. Little metal rod going into their eye. Just doing this makes me cringe. They believe this was a method called couching. This happened to be recorded. The needle would push the cloudy lens to the bottom of the eye, ideally fixing their vision. The oldest tools found in Egypt tell us that 4,000 years ago, this was the first time that it had been done. But afterwards, evidence of couching was found all over the world, so they kind of were the OG couchers. It wasn't until 1747 until a doctor in France named Jacques Daviel, he performed the first cataract extraction surgery in a modern sense. Every method, older, ancient, modern, it all sounds wildly uncomfortable. If you've been through this, kudos to you. Hit that like button, glad your eyes and stuff are working. Number 3, transplantation. Blood transfusion is one thing, but how the hell do we figure out transplants? This arm, now over there on that guy? The first successful one was in 1954 in Boston at the Peter Benton Brigham Hospital. That was like a surgical procedure. The first successful one, by any means, came from around 1000 BC. An Indian surgeon, Samhita, had written down details on how to transplant tissue from one of the body areas to repair nose injuries. I mentioned that a little bit earlier. But later on in the 16th century, that idea was revised. In Renaissance Italy in the 16th century, a man named Gasparo Tagliacozzi and finally French surgeon Alexis Carrel changed the medical game again. In 1902, they published their work on the new techniques using new studies on animals and blood vessels, and to this day, that technique is still used. In 1904, they partnered with Charles Guthrie in Chicago and performed the first successful animal transplant, saving the dog's life. So not that long ago, weirdly enough, had to include it. Number 2, open heart surgery. We've discussed ancient Egyptians and how they would clean out the entire body and put the heart back in. Now, of course, they weren't alive during any of this. That body is long gone. But when was the first open heart surgery? When did the impossible become a reality? Well, the first successful open heart surgery went down in Chicago in 1893. The patient was a man named James Cornish. He got a knife wound to the chest during a brawl. Now, the surgeon, Dr. Daniel Hale Williams, who, by the way, used to be a shoemaker's assistant, saved this man. In the city's first interracial hospital, too. Lots of firsts happening in this one. There we go. There weren't any textbooks on this type of operation at the time, so the odds of survival were low. In fact, there weren't any odds at all at this point. There were no x-rays, antibiotics, anesthesia, but also there was no problem. Apparently, using just a scalpel, Dr. Williams cut through his chest, weaved through the nerves, muscles, ribs, everything important, until eventually he closed a severed artery near the heart. Cornish survived, and come 1894, Williams was promoted to chief surgeon at the Freedmen's Hospital in Washington, D.C. Coming at number 1, stitches. I'm going to totally jinx myself after this, but I've never broken a bone or gotten stitches in my life. I'm on high alert now at all times. 27, not too bad. Many of my friends, though, they've gotten stitches in their life. It's pretty common at this point. So I figured I'd cap this list off by going back to the origins of stitches. Going back to 3000 BC, once again, Egyptian literature, stitches were first made from plants, like hemp or cotton, or even animal tendons or animal arteries. Catgut was the most common. That was thread made of sheep intestines. One of the craziest ways of closing a wound was by using ants, believe it or not. Leafcutter ants or army ants, they would be held against the opening, and then you wait for it to bite down, and once it does so, you would then remove the body, cut the head off, so the head of the ant is still stuck biting onto your cut, staying there until it heals. Imagine Ant-Man showing up to save the day, and he just throws a pocket full of army ants. He's like, I'm here to save you all. He just shows up, whips all the ants. He's like, there you go, you're healed. They're like, we didn't expect this at all. Please send somebody else, Ant-Man.
Number 10 is chloroform the hiccups away. Nowadays we know a nasty case of hiccups is curable by just holding your breath or chugging a bunch of water. But if this was 1899, you'd be prescribed chloroform. Known by many as the mysterious liquid on the rag placed over someone's face to make them faint in many period pieces or cartoons, chloroform gained popularity after Queen Victoria demanded its usage during her labor in 1853, after having been denied it in her previous labors. By taking these lengths to reduce the annoyance of hiccups, your vital organs may pay a steep price. Chloroform has the potential to damage the nervous system, lungs, and trachea, as well as the liver and kidney when exposed long term. This is just one of many medical remedies that we'll be covering from the first Merrick Manual of Diagnosis and Therapy, the oldest continuously published English language medical textbook. All the quack treatments in our list today used to be found in this mass encyclopedia. For instance, number 9 in our countdown is smoke inhalation for asthma and other lung conditions. This may be one of the more counterintuitive remedies on our list, as it's easy to see now that smoke is not beneficial for asthma at all. Through the late 19th and into the next, however, inhaling smoke or smoke, as well as stramonium, a hallucination-inducing nightshade, as well as lobelia, known for its sedative properties, were popular treatments for asthmatics. Asthma is caused when your airways can narrow or swell while producing excess mucus. Smoking, meanwhile, has been shown to eventually reduce the number of cilia, the lungs' filaments which help transport mucus into the lungs, which only leads to the worsening of asthma symptoms. This wasn't the only weird tobacco smoke belief, however. In 1872, an English newspaper talked of tobacco smoke enemas, which even reported that hundreds of lives might have been spared by the tobacco smoke enema. Okay. Weird enough. Plasters, no, not the British word for band-aids, is number 8. This medical treatment was said to have sucked the badness out of a person. They were like a nicotine patch made up of a thin layer sheet of wax as well as leather, and it was able to stick onto the skin. In the wax there were remedies such as lead, opium, frankincense, tobacco, etc. This mix would be applied while still warm to ensure the adhesion of the plaster. Plasters were sold to anyone of any age and came in many different shapes and sizes so that they may be applied to different areas. What were they used for? Everything. Cough, cold, period pain, organ failure, alcoholism, headache, the list can go on forever. Seeing as they wanted the patch to pull as much badness from the body as possible, these patches could be left on for 2 days to 2 weeks to forever, without washing, of course. Naturally, these patches trapped in a lot of moisture that could cause infections, blisters, rashes, and hives underneath, especially once the patch is removed and the skin is finally exposed to air.
Number 7. Cataract surgery. Okay, don't tell him I told you this, but Kyle, my brother Kyle, our other lovely co-host on B, is blind in one eye. Yep. Kyle was born with a cataract, but you would never know because he plays rugby amazingly and somehow he reads this tiny prompter. I can barely do it with 2 eyes. No idea how you do it, man, you're a champ. Cataract surgery is one of the oldest surgeries in the book. Well, rather in the painting. It was found in a tomb in ancient Egypt. It was a painting of what is surely the oldest recorded eye surgery. Scientists are able to make this conclusion due to the length of the tool that the doctor is holding. They believed this was a method called couching, which happened to be recorded. See, the needle would push the cloudy lens to the bottom of the eye, ideally fixing their vision. The oldest tools found in Egypt tell us that 4,000 years ago, this was the first time it had been done. But afterwards, evidence of couching was found all over the world. Now, it wasn't until 1747 until Jacques Daniel, a doctor in France, he performed the first ever cataract extraction surgery in a modern sense. He was the OG. Every method sounds wildly uncomfortable. If you've been through this, like Kyle has, kudos. Number 6. Skin treatment. As soon as summer comes around, honestly, it's game over. I burn so easily. That's why I'm a fan of winter, right? I don't have to keep applying sunscreen to my face all day and feel like I'm about to faint. But how did ancient Egyptians beat the heat back in ancient times? They didn't have banana breeze SPF 35. No, ancient Egyptians valued their skin as a symbol of beauty. Yeah, you think your morning skin routine requires a lot of work? Buddy, read a book. Their routine was written on tomb walls and scrolls. They used rice bran containing UV absorbing gamma oryzanol. Yeah, that was used to block the sun off. Jasmine as well helped repair sun damage. Ancient Greeks would use olive oil as sunscreen, which as far as UV protection goes, it did absolutely nothing. You're burnt and dehydrated, but also you look good, okay? Tan lines, I see you. Number 5, cancer treatment. All right, the big C. Cancer is something that obviously very prevalent in our modern society, and because of the rising rates, it makes us ask ourselves, did cancer exist in ancient times? If so, where was it recorded? While they didn't call it cancer, it definitely did. Some of the earliest evidence of cancer is found in ancient manuscripts, mummies, fossilized bone tumors that have been found in ancient Egypt specifically. There are tons of examples and different forms of cancer that have been found throughout. Perhaps the oldest comes from 3000 BC, and it was found, like I said, in the Edwin Smith papyrus that we talked about before. Now, in this text, it describes 8 cases of tumors or ulcers of the breast and how they treated them back then, or at least tried to. See, back then, these tumors were removed by cauterization using a tool called a fire drill. Other than this, though, the text says in reference to the illness that there is no treatment. So, in ancient times and today, we're still trying to figure this one out. Number 4. Tooth extraction. You may not think of surgery when you talk about tooth extraction, but this for sure counts as surgery. I've had a tooth pulled. It's pretty intense. Every time something gets removed from your body, I'm gonna count that. And if there's definitely blood involved, yeah, I'm gonna count that. Getting a tooth pulled is still so barbaric. Even today, they don't like slice a line and then gently slide the tooth out or anything surgical. No, they just have 2 dentists grab your tooth at the same time, put their foot up, and then yank it out. I was numb, sure, but it was still weird, okay? Back in the day, pulling teeth was done not to make room for braces, but to solve any problem, or all problems, regarding your teeth. Yeah, cavity, gone. Toothache, see ya. Oh, some plaque? No problem. Today, we're lucky to have x-rays and modern technology, to tell us if a tooth is coming in sideways or which ways, but back then, some believed that it was tooth worms. Yeah, this feeling over here, could be a worm. Go get it checked out. Could have worms in your head. Gross. Aristotle and Hippocrates wrote about dentistry around 500 BC, and the way they would handle tooth decay or extraction was by using metal wires to fix wobbly teeth or even a broken jaw, aka ancient braces. Number 3, trepanation. One of history's oldest surgeries. Trepanation was also, it was the worst. It was horrible. To this day, we're not even sure why this was a thing, but we picked up a few ideas along the way. Let's talk about it. Turning the clocks back to thousands of years ago, trepanation was the practice of drilling holes into your skull. A popular theory is that trepanation was done to release evil spirits. Yeah, let's drill some holes in our skull and see if our mental illness just goes away. That'll help. As barbaric as this sounds, skulls found in Peru hint that this procedure wasn't as fatal as you'd first guess. The reason this would happen was also to clear out bone fragments after skull fractures, right? So you show up with a headache and leave with a hole in said head. But honestly, the fact that you're leaving at all is surprising, given the time. They didn't have any advanced medical instruments, but they did have sharp ones. This was the first surgical procedure. It was around 6500 BC. The term trepanation comes from the Greek term trepanon, borer, to drill. Number 2, rotting whale body. Okay, not all these are not disgusting. One of the most strange things on display at the Australian National Maritime Museum exhibit has got to be the whale carcass treatment. This is an odd treatment. Now, the cure for rheumatism back in the 19th century was to crawl inside of a dead whale's body and just hang out for a bit. And by a bit, I mean a full 30 hours. After that point, you would definitely be healed for at least 12 months. Yeah, it began in the town of Eden, obviously a whaling town on the southern coast of Australia. Only while this was happening, it was kind of funny, the user's head would be poking out of the whale. Yeah, like the world's worst sleeping bag, all tucked in there, getting better. It all started when an intoxicated man stumbled into a dead whale body, passed out, and then when he woke up, his rheumatism was cured, just like that. Yeah, from pale ales to pale whales. No more achy joints for you, my friend, let's do it. And finally, number 1. Egyptian nose job. Plastic surgery is more widespread now than it ever has been before, but it's all because it started a long time ago, especially in the ages of the ancient Egyptians. In the Edwin Smith papyrus, along with the documentation of trauma surgeries, bone fractures, fixes, and all that jazz, this text also shows examples of fixes for nasal injuries, which I gotta kinda I have to seek some of that right now. I think I need to get my nose fixed. Can't breathe a lot. The treatment involved manipulating the nose into the desired position before using wooden splints or lint or swabs, anything really to hold it into place. It's an ancient nose job. It's crazy, right? It's truly wild to think back about how much, these people had shaped our world and lives, especially our medical world today. While so much of the civilization still remains a mystery to us, right? It's crazy how much we still know and how much we still don't know.
Number 10, mummies. This should come as no surprise to anyone, but yeah, mummies. Well, not the first and not the last civilization to mummify their friends and family, ceasing to exist, they are probably most known for it. Well, that and maybe the pyramids. The pyramids are pretty cool, I guess. The process of mummifying or preserving the body was thought to be important for the soul during the afterlife. If the vessel or your body was not intact, then your soul could get lost. Therefore, if you want the pharaoh to live forever in the afterlife, then you must pickle and preserve the mighty king. I don't want my soul getting lost. Number 9. 40-year-old's worst nightmare. Despite my best efforts and anti-aging cream, there will come a time when I will be old. Personally, I'm not worried about putting some mileage on. That's life. However, something I am concerned about is the effects of aging. Have you ever just noticed that you ain't as limber as you used to be? You get tired easily. And if you have more than 3 beers, you have to lay down for 3 days. However, something that happens to a lot of men reaching their 40s is a little trouble in the bedroom. This was an issue in ancient Egypt, except sadly, there wasn't a messed up process to fix impotence. I know, right? That's crazy. You thought I was gonna say something weird like wrap a snake around it or something. But no. When in modern times the cute waitress at the golf clubhouse just doesn't get your blood pumping anymore, you can reach for a small blue pill that everybody knows. Egyptians did not possess such luxuries and instead prayed for the Pishadil to work. Dear Desert Jeebus, please make my wiener work again. Thank you. Number 8. Ahead of their time. Ancient Egyptians just may have been ahead of their time and didn't know it. The Egyptians had tons of different herbs, plants, and methods for treating all kinds of ailments. Their alchemy skill was maxed out. I never did that. However, one method they came up with may have been helping more than they thought. A porridge mixture that was boiled down that contained tetracycline, which, just in case you didn't know, is known as an antibiotic. This would have been very helpful for the time, as a scrape on the knee could be the difference between living and, well, not living. While this was being used, it's unsure if the Egyptians really knew why this method worked. We doubt they understood the finite details of antibiotics, and I'm not gonna stand here and pretend that I do either, cause I don't.
Arsenic, like plasters, was a cure-all, and it's number 7 in the countdown. If you've seen our other video, Top 10 Unusual Fashion Trends from the Victorian Era, you might know that arsenic was in everything in the Victorian era. Makeup, wallpaper, dye. No exception was made in medicine either, as arsenic was prescribed for anything from anemia in Merrick's Diagnosis Manual to anthrax, cancer, reduced libido, syphilis, or even cholera. While it was most popular to consume arsenic, it could also be inhaled or injected. Being a byproduct of smelting, it's no wonder arsenic was everywhere during the Industrial Revolution, as there was an excess of it. So it was incredibly accessible and a household remedy. Since doctors already prescribed it to do so much, everyday people just start to use it to treat any common ailment. Unsurprisingly, many people suffered arsenic poisoning symptoms. The ailments are now referred to as Fowler's disease. Number 6 is all kinds of gross and questionable. The everlasting pill. When the Merck Manual was first published, part of the comprehensive treatment plan for an eruptive fever, which is a classification for diseases like scarlet fever, smallpox, and chickenpox, was actually laxatives. Castor oil was the main laxative choice for Victorians up until the debut of the everlasting pill, made up of a metal now known to be toxic called antimony, would be invented. Swallowing this would induce severe vomiting and diarrhea, thus giving the body what they thought to be a healthy cleanse, and their intention was to purge diseases from the body. It earned the name the everlasting pill, as the pill would pass through the gastric system mostly intact, meaning it could be retrieved and cleaned for future use. Seeing as the metal was greatly valuable at the time, it was quite common to keep it in the family and hand it down generation to generation. Imagine getting that in your granny's will. Watch out, it may shock ya. Number 5 is shock treatment. When profit can be made off of insecurity, unsavory business flourishes. Victorians honed in on the man's moral weaknesses as a cause for erectile dysfunction, and impotence was thought to be caused by either too much sex and masturbation or not enough. So doctors took a few shocking routes, literally, such as galvanic baths or bathtubs filled with electrodes, which were supposed to restore sexual desire in an advertised 6 sessions. For a more direct approach, a thin rod with running electric current could be placed up into a man's Repeat that twice a week, about 5 minutes each time, and your little man should be ready to rumble. By the late 1800s, ads were running for electric belts aimed at weak men. They claimed to help cure kidney pain and sciatic nerve issues and backaches and headaches and nervous exhaustion, and of course, mainly their dysfunction. While today impotence is recognized as the result of physical or mental duress, age, or genetics, the belief that electric shock therapy is a useful cure for impotence still persists, and some studies have shown positive signs. See that, fellas? Don't knock it till you try it. Speaking of electrocuting genitals, you can't tell me that didn't happen at least once with the first electric vibrators, which is number 4 in our countdown. Female hysteria became a diagnosable medical condition way back in medieval times when the concept of a wandering uterus, when a discontented or displaced uterus would cause a woman ill health, was first coined. Believed to have symptoms such as irritability, insomnia, fainting, anxiety, menstruation, or horniness, pretty much every woman showed these symptoms. Hysteria was pretty common. Doctors' cure? Hysterical paroxysm, an orgasm. For hundreds of years leading up to this invention, doctors were manually administering pelvic massages to women to achieve the necessary cure. But all that wrist work added up over time and doctors needed a break. So cue Dr. Joseph Mortimer Granville. He created an electric steam-powered electromechanical medical instrument, nicknamed the manipulator. The device allowed women to give themselves home massages to cure their wandering wombs and giving doctors the well-deserved break they needed. A questionable cure for a very questionable diagnosis. Number 3 is not for the faint of heart. They loved leeches. It may be crazy to imagine, but between the late 1700s and well into the early 1900s, there was a booming leech trade all across Europe. Leeches were shipped from Germany to America by the tens of thousands. England even had to start importing them from France by the mid-1800s as their own leech stocks were not even enough to supply their own doctors. Francis Bossuet believed that all diseases resulted from the excess buildup of blood and documented this belief in a medical journal that would subsequently cause leeches to become the go-to treatment in France and then later spread across Europe. This usage of leeches then became worldwide from there, and so obscene that the creatures started to go extinct. However, what these quacks didn't know is that bloodletting was very rarely beneficial to any conditions, and applying leeches often resulted in detrimental side effects such as blood loss, diarrhea, and vomiting, or those with poor immune systems could even be exposed to hazardous bacteria and infection, let alone death from hemorrhagic shock for literally anyone they did this to. Eventually, the excessive use of leeches meant that they became too expensive to ship, too scarce due to the over-farming to find, and medically obsolete in the face of new science that questioned the medical merits of bloodletting. Thank God. Number 2 doesn't allow you to touch where number 1 usually comes out. It's the masturbatory mental illness. Obviously, it's natural, normal, and well, fun, but the Victorian perspective of masturbation was nowhere near what it is today, as our old-timely friends saw it as a serious threat to mental and physical health, or even could kill you. Self-love was seen as an ultimate evil, but beyond moralistic arguments, many physicians thought that every orgasm drained a man's energy. Married men were warned by doctors to limit the amount of sex they were having, while unmarried men were encouraged and urged to conserve their essence by avoiding sex altogether, particularly masturbation. Even wet dreams and uncontrolled ejaculation were considered a sexual dysfunction, as masturbation essentially became the male version of hysteria. So, how did you treat this condition? Men had to stop masturbating. Fear and shame campaigns did what they do best and stimulated the market to provide quick quack remedies. They came in the form of anti-masturbation devices that looked like torture chambers. Most popular was the juggum, which was a metal ring attached around the base of a man's, and then screwed on. If he was to become erect at any point, whether awake or asleep, the now inflated skin would make contact with sharp metal teeth that would dig in. Like I said, most popular. Consider how much worse these other options were for that to be the primo choice. A spermatic truss was essentially the first jock strap, but meant for every day. And the Bowden device fastened a little metal helmet to the end of a man's member that bound up into his pubic hair so that it would be ripped out should he become erect. I'm more than happy to keep going, but I'm sure more than enough people are wincing right now. Keep in mind, while these men were going through this to avoid masturbation, women were being prescribed it as a cure. Number 1 on our countdown may be a bit of a surprise. Surgery. How could surgery be a questionable treatment? Well, it itself isn't, but the men performing it and their hygiene towards surgery were. Most famous is Robert Liston. Said to be able to remove a leg in 30 seconds, he notoriously used his own mouth to hold scalpels, knives, and even once sucked the pus out of a woman's throat wound. According to medical historian Dr. Lindsay Fitzharris, surgeons never washed their instruments or their hands, and Victorian surgeons were known for wearing old surgery garments out of prowess, reportedly so stiff with old blood that they were nearly cardboard in appearance. Even the operating tables themselves were rarely washed down. And it was said a visitor to St. George's Hospital in London 1825 discovered mushrooms and maggots thriving in the damp, dirty sheets of a patient's bed. When asked why they hadn't complained, the patient assumed this to be the norm. And what about surgery in the moment? Well, the patients were conscious and undrugged as they were operated on, and surgeries needed to be fast as a result. 1 in 4 people died after their surgery, whether it was still on the operating table or from infections afterwards. But what about our buddy I mentioned, Dr. Liston? Only 1 in 10 of his patients died. This was because of his speed. "Time me, gentlemen, time me," he'd shout to the surgery spectators to put his legendary speed to the test. Sure, he did accidentally castrate somebody once because of his wild motions, but nobody's perfect. In fact, while he's remembered for being the first surgeon to use anesthesia, wash his knives, and invent a still used medical tool, he is the only surgeon to ever have a 300% death rate. I'd be remiss not to mention that during a leg amputation, his lightning speed reportedly cut off 3 fingers of the assistant who had been holding down the patient. Then, as he brought the knife back up, he slashed the coat of a spectator. The spectator reportedly died immediately of fright, likely a heart attack. Though the assistant and patient survived initially, like most who were treated in Victorian hospitals, they died not long after from infection, which was also just called hospitalism at the time because of how many people died that way. It's easy to say that going to a Victorian surgery or a hospital may have been as efficient as rubbing dirt into a wound.
At number 10, bloodletting. Back in the medieval age, medicine just wasn't the greatest. I mean, they had a plague that wiped out 50% of the population in Europe, and even their quote-unquote doctors were overlapping jobs. Barbers were cutting hair, obviously, but they were also setting broken bones and bandaging wounds, and I'm not sure I would really trust that. But back then, it was a case of you get what you get. So I guess people weren't complaining all that much about their barber Joey from down the street giving them a cast, you know? But other than the practice of patching wounds and whatnot, they were also practicing bloodletting back then, and it was a little much. Bloodletting was a practice of withdrawing blood in order to cure or prevent diseases or illnesses, so doctors would use things like leeches to suck blood out of their patients, but they also used scarification methods to scrape away the skin to drain the blood, and others used lancets to slice open veins, sometimes including the jugular vein. I'm so glad that we don't do this anymore because frankly, I would like my blood to stay inside of my body. Thank you. At number 9, the King's Evil. Being a king or queen in the medieval ages might seem like a cool job, but I don't really think it was. With the rivalries that these people had, they were at risk of being assassinated in one way or another, they had to worry about their bloodlines, and of course, that thing that everyone had to deal with, illness. Some kings, to help out their people, were tasked with healing an illness called the King's Evil, and you're probably thinking, well, these kings aren't doctors, how did they cure illnesses? And to that I say, well, they touched it, of course. This whole thing started in the 11th century when Edward the Confessor became known for touching a person that was suffering from scrofula, aka the King's Evil, and curing them. People thought that this was a miracle, and so for hundreds of years after that, English and French monarchs were tasked with touching the sick to cure them of this illness because monarchs were believed to be an incarnation of the divine. Before we carry on talking about some of the bizarre medical practices from the medieval age, why not take a moment to leave a like on this video if you're enjoying it so far, and while you're at it, consider subscribing to the channel to see more videos like this one. At number 8, tooth worms. If you're one of those people who really hate going to the dentist, just be glad that you didn't have to go to the dentist during the medieval ages, because that was an absolute nightmare and a half. Not only because they had no proper medicine or anesthetics, but because you could also get the worst diagnosis you could ever get, a diagnosis of an infection of tooth worms. They believed that people could be infected with tooth worms that caused a tooth decay, and pits and holes in the tooth were home to a worm that looked like a tiny eel. What's worse than the diagnosis, however, was the removal process. They didn't want to pull out the tooth that was supposedly infected with these tiny worms, so instead they used a more holistic approach. A method that they would use to get rid of the worm would be to take a candle that was made of sheep's fat and various seeds, and they would hold it as close to the tooth as possible so that the worm would run out from heat and fall into a little dish of water that was being held beneath the person's mouth. That sounds like a horrible trip to the dentist, that's for sure.
Number 7.
Tales from the Crypt Keeper.
You didn't think I was gonna talk about mummies and not talk about how they make them, right? Hold on to your spittoons, this is gonna be a rough one. Okay, so we all know that when we pass on, our bodies begin to decay and break down. The Egyptians knew this, so they would have to be one step ahead if they were to have the king pickled in time for the afterlife. Well, first things first, the brains? they gotta go. They would remove the brain with a large spike and sort of mash it up there and well, then they drain the contents from the nose, which that is just disgusting. Stomach, colon, and lungs, well, those won't be needed in the afterlife either, so they gotta go too. But the heart stays though. That's where the soul is. The king was then dried out with mounds of alkaline salt in the world's best beef jerky impression. Afterwards, oils were rubbed into the skin and eventually a resin was applied to aid in the linen wrap sticking to the body, making for that distinct Tupperware brand airtight seal. The pickled king was wrapped numerous more times just to be safe, and then, if he was OG enough, placed into a sarcophagus, and if you're really cool, you'll get your own room full of gold and treasures, and your pet Whiskers, which is a cat, and be mummified because, well, you need him in the afterlife too. That is one heck of an undertaking process. And to be fair, it kinda worked, because there have been a few mummies recovered from Egypt, and they're in amazing condition, considering the age, of course. Number 6, a little off the top. Okay, without the comment section oversharing here, some people have had circumcisions and some haven't. It's a part of life, okay? That's how it goes. Debatable to some, but it happens. This was a common practice in ancient Egypt, claimed to be for hygiene reasons. However, there's something a little bit different about their process. See, today it happens when you're a baby. A strange man comes in the room, and he cuts what he has to cut. L'chaim, it's done. There it is. That's it. It's over. Egyptians waited a little longer, however, closer to the age of 12 or 13. Can you imagine just chilling in the field one day, and then some strange dude grabs you and slaps you down on the table and makes a withdrawal from you to meat and veg? I talked to the chief today, and he just said that's not it. Don't do that. Number 5, bloodletting. The practice of bloodletting was common all over the world, but it may have gotten its start in ancient Egypt. It's a quite simple procedure, really. Black bile out of whack? Lose some blood. Can't stop coughing and sneezing? Drain some blood. Been possessed by demons and now they curse and haunt you as they run up and down your bloodstream? Drain some blood. The question is, however, was this really helping? The short answer, no. No, it wasn't. Besides feeling lightheaded and going pale, this didn't really achieve much, since the days of old were filled with all kinds of other ailments that would easily end someone's life before the spooky demons running up and down someone's bloodstream ever would. I don't feel good. Oh, we better bleed Grandpa again. I don't know, like what? Number 4, plastic surgery. Hey, there's nothing wrong with a little cosmetic surgery. I for one feel that if it'll make you feel better, go for it. Feel better about yourself. Do it. I don't think there's any shame in that. It's been around for a long time, so long that ancient Egyptians might have come up with the first nose jobs. Obviously not like the ones today, but they were knowledgeable in surgeries. After all, you open the chest cavity of a dozen kings and you jot some stuff down on some papyrus, you learn a thing or two. More interesting than shaving down your own beak, however, was their implementation of the prosthesis limbs. Yes, all the way back then. One mummy was actually found with a fake toe. When tested in the modern day with period-accurate sandals, it proved to work quite well and moved more efficiently than first thought. Again, for the time, this was pretty advanced. Number 3, the Ode of the Nile. Imagine people working all day in the blistering sands of Egypt, where the sun beams down on you like, well, the sun in the desert, lifting massive rocks and carving them to shape. I don't know about you guys, but I would be sweating. And that also means I wouldn't be smelling too fresh, resembling that of a high school locker room. Yuck. Well, the Egyptians knew this was an issue, so they came up with what was probably the first underarm deodorant, using nice herbs and other items that had pleasant aromas, and stuck them where the odor was coming from. In your armpits. I just know that after a long day of hard labor in the sun, I would need more than cinnamon sticks and lavender to tame the odor of my sweaty lumberjack armpits. That's just how it goes. Number 2, the Egyptian Brazilian. The 70s have come and gone, and a popular trend today is to be hairless. Everywhere. Even in places where you didn't think it was possible to grow hair when you were younger. Egyptians took it upon themselves to remove all their hair. Well, at least most of it. Not because the Nile River had nice beaches, but because of lice. Oh, yuck. While not an exact cure for the itchy bugs that plague schools across America, it did seem to help. And if you've ever had lice before, you know how bad that sucks. I had them once. It was the worst. Cut my hair, shape my head. Lots of baths. It's no fun, man. I'm too cute for that. I don't want that. Number 1, Wario breath. Wow. Okay. It makes sense that Egyptians would come up with breath mints and mouthwash. They fed their laborers diets of foods that contained a lot of onions and garlic. Sure, I'm just like everyone else who cooks, and when the recipe asks for 1 onion, maybe I put in 2. When I asked for 2 cloves of garlic, maybe I put in 4. You gotta love that flavor. It was thought that they help fight off disease, and they were kinda right. However, after eating all that flavor, your breath would be something rancid. So herbs and mints were used to help quell the breath that could peel the paint off of walls. Thank God.
Number 10, chloroform for asthma. Yeah, chloroform, like the see ya, that kind of stuff. In the past, chloroform was occasionally used as a treatment for asthma, believe it or not, albeit with limited understandings of its potential risks and side effects, of course, as are all of these. The rationale behind this practice stemmed from the belief that asthma was caused by excessive bronchial spasm or nervous irritability. Now, it was thought that chloroform at the time, with its sedative and calming properties, could relax the bronchial muscles and alleviate the symptoms of asthma attacks. On paper, sure, sounds maybe doable. Scientifically, we're like, no, never, don't do that at all, please God. Chloroform, a volatile liquid with anesthetic properties, was administered through inhalation. Patients would inhale the vapor, which was believed to have a soothing effect on the respiratory system, sure, providing temporary relief from the constriction and wheezing associated with asthma. Chloroform is a potent and toxic substance, known to depress the central nervous system and cause respiratory depression when administered in excessive amounts. Oh, additionally, it carries the risk of addiction and long-term health complications, so no, not a great start on this list today. Number 9, flowers for cataracts. In traditional medicine, periwinkle flowers were sometimes used as a treatment for cataracts. Cataracts, a condition characterized by the clouding of lens in the eye, shout out to my brother Kyle, he's blind as shit. Periwinkle flowers contain alkaloids such as vincamine and vincristine, which are known to have pharmacological effects on the circulatory system. I sound like Bill Nye. It was believed that these compounds could enhance blood circulation to the eyes, potentially improving vision and slowing down the progress of these cataracts. People would prepare infusions or extracts from the flowers and then apply them topically or consume them orally in the hopes, again, mostly hopes here, that their vision problems would go away or something would alleviate. However, it's important to note that the efficiency of periwinkle flowers in treating cataracts has not been scientifically proven at all. Eating flowers is not going to help your eye. Of course not. You know what I mean? Cataracts are a complex condition with various underlying causes, and their treatment typically requires surgery or corrective lenses. Not a couple flower petals. That's not, what is this? No, definitely not. Number 8, sour cream hands. Nice, that was my nickname back in elementary. In the past, old sour cream was occasionally used as a home remedy to alleviate chapped hands. Nice, let's do it. Taco Tuesdays, let's do it. The rationale behind this practice was that the lactic acid present in sour cream could, maybe, potentially, not really, help exfoliate dead skin cells and moisturize the hands. Sounds gross, but it kinda worked sometimes. The creamy consistency of sour cream was believed to create a protective barrier, preventing further moisture loss and promoting healing. However, before you go in and ruin your taco night at home, it's important to note that this remedy lacks any scientific evidence and may not provide long-lasting or optimal results. Yeah, sour cream, just keep that on your wrap, not your hands. Then you're all set. Number 7, Nux vomica. In history, Nux vomica derived from the seeds of Strychnos nux vomica tree, very poisonous. It was occasionally used as a remedy for headaches. Not a good plan. This practice was based on the belief that the seeds contained compounds that could alleviate pain. Sure, again, good attempt, bad landing. Nux vomica was thought to have stimulant properties, increasing blood flow, relieving tension, all that good stuff, which in turn could provide relief from headaches. However, it's important to note that the seeds contain strychnine, which is a highly toxic substance, one of the worst for humans to eat, and their use as a remedy, it's not supported by the modern medical knowledge at all. Safer and more effective treatments for headaches are now available. You don't have to be eating any poisonous nuts. Thank you so much.
At number 7, pee reading. Now this might not be considered a surgery, but this medieval age tradition was probably one of the strangest medical practices I have ever heard. In medieval England, people were known to get diagnosed based on their pee. Back then, they believed that the consistency, color, and taste of someone's pee could diagnose someone's ailments. They took this method of diagnosis so seriously that they published books for the wealthy so that they could do this practice at home, and these books included illustrations and color charts so that they knew how to judge their own pee. According to their text, if your pee was white, then it was the ideal color, and that meant that everything was working just fine. If it was wine colored like blue or black, then that meant that something was very wrong, and if it was green, then you were basically on your last leg and you should probably get your will in order. Now, I'm not sure how accurate these readings actually were, since medicine was basically non-existent back then, but they tried their best with what they had, I guess. However, I'm pretty sure you don't need a book to tell you that if your pee is wine colored, that's a bad thing. At number 6, eye surgery. Our eyes are very sensitive, which is why it's so important to keep them healthy. Oftentimes when something is wrong with our eyes, we naturally go and get them fixed. But back in the medieval age, if something was wrong with your eyes, you really had to think long and hard about whether or not you really wanted to get them fixed, because the procedure to fix your eyes sounded like an absolute nightmare. Back then, when someone had cataracts, a surgical procedure called needling was performed, and it involved having a doctor push a thick black needle into the patient's cornea. Remember, there was no anesthesia back then, so you were just raw dogging this entire experience. After the procedure was completed, the patient would usually be left with an unfocused eye, described to be similar to a camera without a lens. That didn't necessarily matter to everyone, because while it would be hard to read the Bible, it would still be okay to plow a field, and as long as they could work, that's really all that mattered. At number 5, kidney stones. Now, I can't say that I'm all that familiar with the way that kidney stones are treated these days, but I would assume that it is very different and not as terrifying as how they were treated back in the medieval age. After learning about this, I'm convinced that this could double as a form of torture. Basically, how it went down is a physician's assistant would be sitting on top of you while you had your legs strapped to your neck. And then as the assistant was holding you, the doctor would stick 2 of his fingies up your little booty hole, press his fist against your pubes until he felt a hard pellet indicating a stone. After the diagnosis, then it would be removed through the bladder using a sharp instrument. Now, I've never had a kidney stone, so I don't know how painful it is to have one, but for those who have experienced this, would you rather go through this medieval procedure or just tough it out until you pass the stone yourself? At number 4, butt stuff. Even back in the medieval age, they had treatments for hemorrhoids. This illness was often associated with Saint Fiaker, also referred to as the, quote, patron of hemorrhoids. A 7th century tale said that this monk cured his illness by sitting on a sacred rock for several hours, and so in the medieval age, some physicians believed that the same method could apply to other people's butts. Obviously, that didn't work, so some other superstitious physicians came up with an alternate and more nightmare-inducing way of getting rid of hemorrhoids. If you didn't want to sit on a sacred rock for an extended period of time, you could always get a red-hot iron tube put up your butt. Yeah, I don't think it gets any worse than that. At number 3, belladonna. Belladonna, deadly nightshade, whatever you want to call it, doesn't make it any less poisonous. This plant is one of the most toxic plants around, but that doesn't mean that people haven't tried to use it in their personal use. Normally, we want to stay away from toxic things like chemicals and X's, but back in the days of old, people said full send and used belladonna as eye drops. Yeah, that's right. Even though this is literally poisonous, they thought, let's put it in our eyeballs. The organs that we use to see, because that's a bright idea, right? Many people, mostly women, used eye drops made out of deadly nightshade because it changed the size of their pupils to make them look more starry-eyed, and that was seen as a beauty trend. In moderation, these eye drops wouldn't really cause too much damage, but prolonged use of the poison could see some serious health concerns like stiff muscles, short-term memory loss, confusion, disorientation, and in some cases death, because it could literally paralyze your heart. And if you're thinking, man, I'm so glad we don't do that anymore, then think again, baby, because if you've ever been to the optometrist and you've had your pupils dilated, guess what they use? That's right, belladonna. It's not harmful to put just a couple drops in your eyes and not to do it again for a while, but if you get your hands on it and start using it too much and in high dosage, then you're in for some trouble. At number 2, trepanation. Trepanation is the process of drilling or scraping a hole into the human skull. Yeah, I know, that doesn't really sound like fun in the slightest, but back in the olden days, people did it, and it was a relatively common body modification for some reason. This practice was done in all sorts of cultures throughout different periods of time. During the medieval ages into the Renaissance, trepanation was used to treat epilepsy and mental disorders. This practice also dates as far back as the Paleolithic period. In ancient Peru, trepanation was done using a ceremonial knife called a tumi. In ancient Greece, it was done using a drill. Polynesians used sharpened seashells, and in Europe, the procedure was done using sharp flint or obsidian. Though we know that in the medieval times and the Renaissance, trepanation was considered a medical practice, in ancient times, the reason for this practice is still uncertain. It could have been to try and fix damage from a head trauma, but it's also believed that this practice was done to heal mental problems, release toxic spirits, or even as some kind of ritual. And finally, at number 1, knife hand. Now, this one is by far the craziest medieval surgery in my opinion. So you know Captain Hook, right? He's got a hook for a hand. Well, this guy I'm gonna tell you about has Captain Hook beat by a landslide. A 6th century medieval burial was found in Italy, and it revealed a male warrior who had a knife for a hand. Yeah, this man had a knife instead of a hand. This warrior had his hand amputated. However, the reason for said amputation is unknown. In place of the lost hand, the prosthesis was a blade. Now, I don't know if this guy lost his hand in battle or something and they just gave him the best that they could, and that was a knife as a placeholder, or if he just willingly chopped off his hand so that he could have a knife hand. But either way, that is so badass, and I would have loved to see this guy in battle.
Number 10, Hutchinson-Gilford progeria. HGPS is one of the rarest conditions in the world. It is a condition where the body dramatically and rapidly ages beginning as early as childhood. So it's kind of like Benjamin Button except backwards. Most of the time you can't tell at birth as they usually look normal, but as they age and grow they do not gain weight. Their facial characteristics also become thinner and fragile looking, their eyes and ears protrude, and their features like their nose and lips become thin and beak-like. The condition also causes alopecia, which is hair loss, and they lose their fat beneath their skin. However, intellectual development is uninhibited and their motor skills don't suffer either, so they're literally just trapped inside this body. But sadly, the condition does not have a very long life expectancy as they often suffer heart attacks and strokes at a very young age. There are approximately 100 documented cases where patients lived into their 20s. Currently, the cure remains a mystery. Number 9. Allergic to the cold. What? I mean, I don't like the cold, but to clarify, not a cold, but the cold. Entirely opposite to another case on this list, there are actually people in this world that are allergic to the cold. Right? Then that's not just like them like shivering in the wind. Like, I don't mean that, and I don't mean your aunt who flies to Florida for Christmas. I'm talking about breaking out in rashes. The condition is called cold urticaria. Even slight exposure can result in a welt, and jumping into cold water could result in a full anaphylactic shock. Imagine how much of a problem this is. Like, the cure still eludes doctors, but they may actually know the reason. Dr. Gerald Gleisch at the University of Utah studies patients with the condition. He says that it appears to be due to an antibody called immunoglobulin E. This antibody causes the inappropriate immune reaction and it may hold in store the cure. So far only antihistamines work a little bit, but it still remains a boggling mystery as to how things could go this wrong. You know? Very, very strange. Number 8. Kuru. I'm not gonna lie to you, I was debating putting this one on the list because it has an explanation, as some of them do on this list, but it still has no cure. Sort of. Kuru is a very strange, fatal brain disease similar to mad cow. Proteins called prions cause a buildup of abnormal brain tissue. This causes irreversible brain damage and there's just no going back. It's 100% lethal. It was first discovered in a remote region of New Guinea by a tribe that practiced consuming human flesh. Their belief was that it preserved the spirits of the dead. This little fact brings me to my next point, that Kuru can only be contracted through the consumption of human brains. The tradition to consume human bodies is now outlawed, so there have been significantly less cases. However, there remains no cure to the disease besides, like, you know, not having human brains for Sunday dinner.
Number 6. Urine. In ancient history, urine, pee, number 1, it was sometimes used as a medical treatment due to the belief that it possessed healing properties. Yeah, pour it in your eyes, see what happens. Don't do this. The practice can be attributed to various factors including cultural beliefs, limited medical knowledge, of course, and the symbolic association of urine with bodily fluids and purification. Yeah, that last one's a big one. One reason urine was used as a treatment with this historical connection to the concept of uroscopy. That's where the color and smell and taste of urine was examined to diagnose illnesses. Yeah, some dude would be like, bronchitis. That man's got bronchitis. Go get him. This practice originated from the belief that urine was a reflection of the body's overall health and imbalances. In some way, sure. In most ways, no. Furthermore, urine was considered to have cleansing properties and was believed to contain a substance that could combat infection and promote healing. That good healing stuff. There we go. Brewing up that healing potion. It was used topically to clean wounds, it was used as eye drops to treat eye infections, and it was even consumed orally for various ailments. However, it is crucial to note that the use of urine as a medical treatment in ancient times, or any of those times, was not based on scientific understanding or evidence whatsoever. They were just putting pee in their eyes and just hoping for the best. Number 5. Moles' migraines. The use of dead moles as a remedy for migraines was based on certain folk belief and traditions. Now, it was believed that the properties of a dead mole could help alleviate the pain with your migraine. Somehow, in some way, shape, or form. We're just gonna grind up a mole and see what happens. One method involved doing such. One method, you had to dry the mole and then grind it into a fine powder. This powder was then either consumed orally or mixed with water. It's like the worst crystal light ever. You'd be shaking that for hours before it looks good. Or this powder was applied topically to your temple or your forehead. Just dead mole rat powder. Smells great. It was thought that the potent energy or the mystical qualities possessed by the mole would be transferred to this individual, providing relief from migraines. However, do I have to say it anymore? No, it didn't work. The use of dead moles as treatment for migraines lacks scientific evidence, and it's not supported at all today. Because yeah, imagine rolling up to the doctors and he starts grinding up a mole rat. He's like, what is it today? Your foot? Is your foot hurting? No problem, we'll get you all sorted out. Number 4. Medieval dung. We talked about number 1, now we gotta talk about number 2. That's the order it comes in. In medieval times, dung, animal feces, was occasionally used as an ingredient for these treatments. I know, where's he gonna put it this time? This practice may seem a little odd to us today, but hear me out, it had some legs back then. Had some prevailing medical theories and limited understanding, but it was something. Dung, poop, animal poop, was believed to possess these medical properties such as its supposed ability to draw out toxins, stimulate healing, or serve as a topical antiseptic. It was used in various forms, most commonly in ointment, and was applied to wounds, ulcers, skin conditions, you name it, man. Get creative. Whatever hurts, put some poop on it. Yeah, welcome to these times. Animal dung, such as, the dung from cows or pigeons, it was commonly used due to its availability. Yeah, you thought urine was bad, but it gets worse. Pigeon poop for your elbow? I'm like, I don't know, man. This doesn't seem very good. Number 3, mercury. Mercury, yeah, the element. Let's do this. In ancient times, mercury was used as a medicine due to its perceived healing properties. Now, this was an element, okay? It's not poo, it's not pee, it's something legit in the scientific community. It was believed to have a range of therapeutic effects, including treating infections, skin conditions, and even mental disorders. All that in a drop of mercury. How lucky are you? Mercury was applied topically or ingested orally, so terrible, with the idea that it could purify the body and balance your humors and promote overall well-being. With the element mercury, of course. However, the use of mercury in ancient medicine was based on horrible, incomplete knowledge, and its toxicity was not fully understood at the time. Yeah, don't eat that. Don't put that anywhere near you. Prolonged exposure to mercury often results in severe health complications, including neurological damage. So if you have a headache, don't go back in time. That's pretty much it. Trepanation. Ancient trepanation, also known as trepanation, if you want to be all fancy, throw the fancy PH in there. It was a surgical procedure in which a hole was drilled or scalped into the skull. Now, this practice dates back thousands and thousands of years, and it was performed in various ancient cultures for some reason. It was believed to serve different purposes, including relieving headaches, treating skull fractures, while creating one, or my personal favorite, releasing evil spirits. Evil spirits, yes, finally, be gone. Trepanation was performed using crude tools and horrible techniques, often without anesthesia, so you'd be awake to feel most of it at least. The motivations behind trepanation in ancient times remained a subject of debate, encompassing medical, religious, and cultural factors. And also Saw 3, I think it's a little bit of Saw 3 in that one for sure, that's terrifying. And finally, number 1, it's all in your head. In the ancient Babylonian world, illnesses were commonly connected to, you guessed it, supernatural forces. Yep, next time you get a sore throat, it's the devil, nothing else. Malevolent spirits or divine retribution, all because you're sick. As a result, the role of Babylonian healers resembled that of priests and exorcists more than modern physicians, which is so silly. Their treatments incorporated elements of magic and ritualistic practices. For instance, if a patient exhibited teeth grinding, this healer would interpret that as a sign of a deceased family member attempting to communicate to them during sleep. So in turn, they're trying to talk back, I guess. Drawing from ancient necromantic texts, the healer would prescribe a peculiar remedy. The patient was then advised to sleep next to a human skull for an entire week. To ensure the effectiveness of this unsettling treatment, the tooth grinder, this Mr. Talky Talk, he was instructed to kiss and lick the skull 7 times every night. Which, I mean, first of all, terrible for your sleep. You're not gonna get a wink with that schedule. But also disgusting. Whose head is this? I have so many questions. Why? This is a fetish. This isn't a practice. These rituals demonstrate the intricate blend of spiritual beliefs and medical practices that characterize Babylonian healthcare. Growing up, I had a humidifier, so almost the same thing, kind of the same as a human skull.